Hello everyone and welcome back to Nathrandir's Guide to Everything. Fully aware it's been a long time since I last checked in with you folks. I did put out a few updates. Essentially I've just been changing jobs, moving, and I got a puppy. So I'll probably pop something up on the screen now of said puppy. So I've been distracted, but he's one now. It's been that long already. And I checked in with the channel the other day and we got a ton of new subscribers. So welcome and thank you for those that have kind of stuck with me after all this time. I'm going to try and get back to some kind of regular content, though I don't know whether it'll be quite the same as what we had before with the Legend Forge and stuff. I just don't have the time these days, but something like this, we'll see. I'm going to stop rambling and we'll just get into the video, shall we? So this video is basically all about how I am a terrible dungeon master. I'm going to go through 5 mistakes that I've made and hopefully inform you on how to fix them or how to, I guess, not make the same mistakes yourself in the future. First up, it's really establishing the world that you're going to be playing in with your players. I think my most recent campaign has been a homebrew. It's actually still going on, but I don't feel like I did a good enough job of establishing exactly what the world was going to be and where the story might go, essentially. And it led to a couple of characters not really gelling properly with the world, and I hadn't really encountered this before just because I guess I'm still technically kind of new to this, especially building my own stuff. So yeah, I was playing with new players as well for the most part, well, a mixture actually, but it ended up causing a bit of a rift. They ended up changing characters entirely. So not ideal. Their characters in the end didn't really gel with the narrative, and like the way they saw their characters didn't really match up with the themes of the campaign and where I saw it going, where it was just going in the moment. So the fix for this is super simple. If you're an aspiring DM, be very explicit about the setting and what the themes of your campaign are. You know, it does cover this in the standard Dungeon Master's Guide with just doing like a checklist of what's okay and what's not okay to say. I know my friends well enough and my players well enough. I don't have to check in with what's okay to say and things like that. But especially with new players, I think, and to be fair, I guess it doesn't really matter what experience level it is. Be very specific about your setting and the themes you're going to cover in the campaign, or what you think you're going to cover anyway. That can change over time, of course, as well. You're not going to spoil anything by letting your players know that it's going to be a Spelljammer campaign, for example. So high fantasy, but also you're going to be on spaceships traveling through the astral sea and such. You can just tell them that. Make sure they know they're going to be talking to, I guess, like space pirate warlords and crime bosses and whatever else is in your homebrew or whatever else you want to include in your setting. The rift I came upon with my party was that a couple of the characters didn't feel their character would be ready to go out into the astral sea, and they just wanted to explore the starting area more, per se, the world I had made, which is called the Dalurin Highlands. So I spent quite a long time on that homebrew just as a starter, but then by like level 3 or 4 it was looking to expand into the astral sea, and they didn't feel their characters were ready, so it didn't quite work out in the end. But that's number 1. Yeah, make sure you establish your world and your setting and your themes very distinctly. It will really help your players create their characters. And if you're not sure about a character, maybe just check in with that player and actually ask the question, like, are you sure this is the right one for you? Mistake number 2. I've mentioned a couple of times already, I play with some newer players to the game. My mistake is not checking in with novice players about their character optimization. Now, you may find that more experienced players, they don't mind not optimizing because they want to lean more into the roleplay. It's one of those moments where like a weaker statistic on a character can actually really benefit it and really make for a much more interesting character rather than one with like high stats across the board. I've come to learn that too. But I think there is something to be said, and this is going into the fix now, there is something to be said for making sure players, new players, are being properly guided through their character creation first of all, and after a few levels, maybe check back in with them, just see if their character is where they thought it would be. The way this came up for me was I noticed, for example, that one of my players he's an artificer, and they kept just missing with their gun, basically. And taking a closer look at their statistics, they had taken some feats and things that didn't really work for them. Well, I guess I advised them this isn't really optimal for high level play, because we're at like level 13 now and things hit hard, and it's one of those things where you can't really afford to be, I guess, missing and whiffing spells every single time and attacks, because it can feel really bad if you don't feel like you're having an impact on the fight. So just chatting with that particular player actually led me to chatting with a couple of other players that maybe weren't quite satisfied or didn't quite know what to do in particular moments within the game. And so we went through that, and now all of them are much more happy with those characters. So I think it's worth checking in maybe every 2 or 3 levels, especially with new players. Make sure they think their character is on the right track, and maybe you can advise them whenever you level up. Just say, if you want to have a chat about something optimal, just let me know, just reach out. So a super simple one, and definitely a mistake I had made, which I won't again for the future. Mistake number 3 is a bit of a subjective one, I think. And this is just the pace of sessions. We recently had a session in the game I'm continuing to talk about here, which is why this video is it's sparked from, basically. We spent an entire session which is about 2 hours usually for us, trying to unattune from a cursed object. Now, I quite enjoy cursed objects. I think they make for some good roleplay, especially if they're sentient and things like that, which this was a sentient sword. The player that attuned to it was none the wiser, so when they did, it was quite a fun reveal the prior session, but it was something that actually they hadn't encountered before. Again, mostly new players, so they weren't really sure on where to go with it, and I think my mistake was putting a bit more weight on it than it needed. Now, them just being unsure and trying to figure it out was one part of it. Eventually they cast Identify and figured out that it had some cursed properties, which Identify, by the way, I don't think actually does reveal cursed properties in and out, but in my game, it depends on the item, but in my games usually it does. It shows you a little bit of something about it, about the sentience that's in there. Anyway, rambling again. We spent an entire session trying to unattune from this thing, and really it was mostly inconsequential, which at the end of the session for me, I was like, this is all the party achieved today. I felt bad. I do feel like they enjoyed it, and I've asked them since, and they were like, yeah, no, it's fine. We didn't have any problem with it per se. But for me, I think I would love to have kept that for maybe under an hour at least. It didn't need to be as long as it was. I think I could have done a better job at expediting the process, or maybe just giving more hints on how to get around it. Now, this isn't always the case with powerful items specifically. If someone attunes to a powerful item, and a powerful, very evil item, as may often be the case, with the primary goal of accomplishing another goal or accomplishing a mission or something, there should absolutely be consequences for that if it's very obvious to them that is the case, like objects that have very specific unattuning features, not just a saving throw, because what kept happening with the sword I was just mentioned was the character just kept failing the saving throw to unattune from it, and it was just slowly killing them basically. And that's just not, I guess the DC is there for a reason. They should just try the next day and just, they attune to a sword, face the consequences. But for me, it just didn't feel like I wanted it to in the moment. So unless it's like an artifact level item where you need to be in a specific place to unattune, or you need to take a particular action to unattune that has weight, has consequence, probably just expedite that process, or just think more carefully before you throw cursed items at your players. Okay, so mistake number 4, I think, is probably a lot of what a lot of DMs do, especially earlier on in their career per se. I think I'm pretty good at this now, but I thought this is just a great tip anyway. Don't ask for rolls all the time. If they are not going to have a consequence, then why ask for one? If you want to give the party and characters information, just do it. Just feed it to them, or hint where they need to look, and then you can ask for a roll with a low DC. The worst thing you can do is find something that's really important to your narrative and then hide it behind a skill check. It doesn't really make sense to do that, because you want them to discover these things, right? Unless it's a twist or something hard to find, or treasure, or a note that might give them more of a hint on where to go in the story, that makes sense. But if you're just trying to give them good information, then don't put it behind a roll. I've definitely been guilty of this. Really consider what the potential outcomes are before asking for a roll. Is it really necessary? Can you just use their passive perception investigation? Or can you just take a previous roll? I see often some Let's Plays I watch online, they ask for stealth checks like over and over and over again. I'm like, It doesn't make sense. This player has already described they're trying to be stealthy. You don't need more than one for, a short space of time, I find, anyway. So I've definitely gotten better at that. The long and short of it is, if the information is critical to your narrative or relative to what the player is trying to do, just give them that information in the simplest way possible. Often just call attention to a couple of things that will lead them down the right path, right? Being a dungeon master is all about the illusion of choice, I guess. There is a lot of freedom given to the players, but the illusion of choice is what will drive your narrative forward in the game. I hope that makes sense. The final mistake that I have a tip for, which I think I've covered very briefly in a previous video too, is asking your players, especially new players as well, to create a backstory. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I have found that when I ask for these things, I always want loads of depth, because basically I watch too much Critical Role, and I love the way Matt Mercer really kind of just involves all the players into the story of the narrative. And quite frankly, I don't think I'm that good at this to be able to do that. So I think just be really careful on how much backstory you ask for. Start simple and expand when needed, I think is what I've found works for me the best. So yeah, start as simple as possible. If a character, if one of your players really wants to come up with something quite complex, maybe give them a bit more information about your world so they can weave it into the narrative themselves. So you don't have to do all the work with coming up with place names and things like that. Let them do that kind of thing and just, I guess, check it off for the future. Make sure you're happy with it before you say, yes, this is fine. It's also worth knowing the campaign that you're going to run. For example, my current homebrew, I asked for a lot more from my players, so I could try and weave them into the story with mixed results. From a couple of players, I got a lot. From a couple of players, I got very, very little. But I think that's okay. I think that caters to their play style as well. Sometimes players that aren't as comfortable role-playing will just give less. And you may have to pry something out of them if you want to try and involve their character a little bit more, if you see an opportunity for a good narrative thread or a side mission, something like that. I made this initial mistake of asking for too much backstory when running the Curse of Strahd campaign from D&D, from Wizards. A backstory in Curse of Strahd is basically not pointless, I don't want to say. You can still have a character arc, especially if they're a cleric or a paladin. It makes a lot more sense. But if they have a backstory that is tied into where they are from, it doesn't really work, because in Curse of Strahd, it's a campaign where you're teleported to another domain, another plane of existence, basically. It's the domain of dread of Barovia. So specific backstories of where they're from and things are not necessary, really. It's worth getting some details because it can add flavor to a character, but it's definitely worth mentioning to your players that you will not be in the world that your character is from for basically the entirety of the campaign. Something that might work in a scenario like this, backstory wise, for a Curse of Strahd campaign. Perhaps that's something great to put in the comments. You've played Curse of Strahd. Did you have a backstory that really worked well in the campaign? Please feel free to pop that in the comments. Something I've written down here that might work for a campaign like Curse of Strahd, which is really isolated. Your character could be a disgraced paladin that let a necromancer siege their local town, or they weren't powerful enough to stop them. And now they've taken up an oath to never let that happen again. So that can just drive your player characters' motivations. Perhaps when they are teleported to Strahd, they're just trying to prove themselves. They've taken up this oath to smite evil wherever they see it, or serve their lord, or whatever it might be, and they get kind of thrust up into this campaign. So they might find that, that necromancer that is enslaved or is kind of lording over their town now, there are some similarities there to Strahd, who is just, he's the ancient, he is the land. So that could drive your player character to have a bit more at stake. They feel like they're doing the right thing, and then that's where you can make their oath feel like something powerful and useful to them, something to stick by. That's all for now. I hope you found this useful. Would-be DMs, and if you're a veteran DM, let me know if you've made any more mistakes. There's an easy fix. Please pop those down in the comments. Yeah, like I said, thank you to all the new subs. I'll hopefully see you again in the next video. This has been Nathrandir's Guide to Everything. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.